Hi friends, as all of us know that exploratory data analysis takes 60% of the total time in any data science project. One major issue is if the number of columns are greater than 20, then it is quite hectic to analyze all of them. So, with the intent of saving some time, we have automated the plotting of graphs of the data sets. Initially, we have considered that we have all the numerical columns, and later on we have made modifications to handle other situations also. So we will go through the datasets that we are going to use and watch how our tool works. We are using two datasets, cars and empty cars. In the car dataset, we have 9 columns, out of which 2 columns are categorical, whereas in empty cars we have 11 columns and all of the columns are numerical columns. Here we have our initial version of our tool, that is graphs, which is expecting an input named data, that is the dataset that we are going to analyze. Here we are considering that the dataset that we are going to analyze contains only numerical columns, and we are saving histograms and box plot for all the numerical columns in a directory named plots in the current working directory. So let's check how our function works. Here we are expecting an input from the user whether the dataset is in Excel or CSV. Currently our dataset empty cars is of CSV format, so we are entering CSV. Here, as you can check, the graphs are getting generated and getting saved in the directory name plots. So let's pick one graph and see. Here we can see that a histogram and a box plot both are generating at a single moment. Now we are going to delete all the plots from this directory and have a glance at our code. So here we are importing all the necessary libraries that we are going to use. In this portion of the code, we are expecting input from the user whether the file is CSV format or Excel format. In this portion of the code, we are actually using the subplots concept to divide a plot into histogram and box plot so that we can have both in a single image. Here we have our second version of our tool, that is graphs v2. Here we have introduced one new improvement. If a user wants a selected number of columns to get the graph printed and saved into the directory, then we have introduced a new argument named column index. Currently we have assigned it as -1 because if the user haven't mentioned any column index, then by default it will print all the graphs for the columns, considering our dataset has only numerical columns. So let's run and try our code. Here we have mentioned the column names as column number 1, 5th and 8th. So let's run and check. So as we can see, the histogram and the box plot of all the 3 columns got saved in our directory. Now let's clean the directory, delete all the files and check what our code says. So here is the main changes in our code from the previous version. Here if the column index is -1, we are printing all the columns and saving the graphs of all the columns in our directory. But if the user has entered the columns, then we are only printing and saving the plots of those graphs into our current working directory. Here we have our third version of our tool named graphs v3. The modification that we are making in this version is we are considering that any dataset can have both numerical and categorical variables. So for numerical variables we are plotting and saving those graphs, that is our box plot and histogram, in our current working directory. But If we have any categorical columns in our dataset, then we are saving the bar graph of those columns in the same current working directory. So let's run our code and check how our code works. So for this purpose, we are taking our dataset cars, which contains both numerical and categorical columns. So let's run it. As we can see, the 8th column of our dataset, that is a categorical column named origin, and a bar plot have been saved for the same. Here is the bar plot for the origin, in which we have US, Japan and Europe as the categories. Let's clear this directory and check our code. So the major changes that we have done from the previous versions are that if the data type of the columns are float, int 64 or int 32, then we are considering those columns as numerical and plotting histogram and box plot for them. Otherwise, we are plotting the bar plot for the rest of the columns, considering them as categorical columns.